Okay, 2.6, we start talking today about geometric proofs. Hooray! By the end of the video, you should have a better feel for how to write a two-column proof, which is what we're really going to be working on all year long, as well as prove geometric theorems by using deductive reasoning. Remember, deductive reasoning is where we use logic, laws, science, that kind of reasoning, and versus inductive reasoning. A theorem is a new word we haven't talked about. You guys have heard about Pythagorean's theorem. Anytime you see the word theorem, that's a statement that you can actually prove. So Pythagorean's theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, that's actually, we can prove it. So, oops, that didn't make sense. A statement you can prove, sorry. I'm going to abbreviate. Okay. So Pythagorean's theorem, you can actually prove it. And we'll work later on how to prove it. There's lots of ways. So we're going to start talking, we're going to change from algebraic proofs, which is what we did yesterday, and now talk more about geometric proofs. So using what we've already learned in chapter 1 to prove things. So here's example number 1. It says write a justification for each step. So I've already written the left-hand side of the proof for you, and all we're going to work on today is filling in the right-hand side. So given angle A and angle B are supplementary and measure of angle A equals 45 degrees, what can we conclude? What can we prove? So here are our angles. So if you look at box number 1, it says angle A and angle B are supplementary and measure of angle A is 45 degrees. That's exactly the same thing as the given. So we're going to start our directions, start our story off by writing given. Now, when I tell you that they're supplementary, some of you guys are thinking, well, that means that they add up to be 180 degrees, because that's what the word supplementary means, because that's the definition of supplementary. The next step, you notice, it says measure of angle A plus measure of angle B equals 180 degrees. And that's because that's the word, that's the definition of supplementary. Notice how this happened first, and then we could use definition of supplementary. Okay, so now we know that these two angles add up to 180 degrees, and we know angle A is 45 degrees. So notice in step 3, the only thing that's changed from 2 to 3 is that this measure of angle A disappeared and 45 degrees went in for it. That's called substitution. We were substituting in a number for an angle. So if you notice, the only thing that's different between step 3 to step 4 is now the measure of angle B is still the same, but something happened to the 45 and 180, and now it's 135 degrees. Well, if you were trying to solve for measure of angle B, you would have to subtract the 45 degrees from both sides. Because you're subtracting on both sides, remember that's like what we did yesterday, that's called subtraction PO. And now you can conclude that measure of angle B equals 135 degrees. There's nothing else we can conclude. That's the end of our story. So I want you to see if you can maybe do the same thing for number 2. Okay, and we're going to do number 3 in class. But number 4, I want to give you, number 4, it's actually fill in the blanks to complete a two-column proof. So the only difference between what we were doing in 1 and 2 and what we were doing here in 3 and 4 is that some of the statements are blank here, and some of the reasons are blank. So we're going to have to fill in on both sides of the proof this time. Again, the left-hand side of the proof is where we do the math part, and the right-hand side is where we give our justifications, or like our reasons why, our theorems and our properties and all that fun stuff, postulates and stuff. Okay, so here's the problem. Given angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary, so these two angles are supplementary. And then also that angle 2 and angle 3 are supplementary. So this one and this one are also supplementary. I want you to prove that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. So I want you to prove that these two are congruent. Notice I'm not going to put tick marks on them yet. I know eventually they will be, but I'm going to hold off on the picture. I'm only going to draw things that I know for sure about that are given. Okay, so if you notice, the first step is blank, but it says given. So that means we're going to write all this in this little blank spot, and I apologize it's so small, but this is how I would write it. Angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary, and then angle 2 and angle 3 are supplementary. Okay, and that's given. Now this is kind of like the other one we did. Notice that supplementary, I tell you they're supplementary, well, that means that they're going to add up to be 180 degrees. That's the definition of supplementary. So notice in step 2, I took this sentence and I changed it into math. So measure of angle 1 plus measure of angle 2 equals 180 degrees. That's what this first sentence said. And then the second sentence said measure of angle 2 plus measure of angle 3 equals 180 degrees. Some of you guys are like, Ms. Broyles, this is such a lame step. This is just like opening up the peanut butter jar. You have to do it. The details are important. Okay, notice in step 3 is blank, but it says we're going to use substitution. So looking at number 2, what things are the same in both equations? If you notice, 180 degrees are both the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to cross those out, and we're going to push these two equations together. So our new equation is going to be measure of angle 1 plus measure of angle 2 equals measure of angle 2 plus measure of angle 3. Okay. Now we have this long equation, and if you notice, the next step, number 4, says measure of angle 2 equals measure of angle 2. Notice they're only talking about one thing, so that's the reflection PO that we talked about. Remember, the reflexive talks about one thing, symmetric talks about two things, and the transitive talks about three things. So since this is only talking about one angle, you're using the reflexive PO. And that's important because the next thing we're going to do, if these are the exact same thing and they're on opposite sides of the equation, then that means that I can subtract one from each side and get rid of it, eliminate them. So what I was doing, I was subtracting, and now what's left over is measure of angle 1 equals measure of angle 3, which is exactly what step 5 is. What I did to get rid of those was I subtracted, and since I'm talking about numbers, I'm talking about measure of angles, so I'm talking about a number, that's subtraction PO. Then finally, there's only one step left, right? That should always be your proof statement. So my proof statement is angle 1 is congruent. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. What's the only thing that's different between 5 and 6? The only thing that's different is that the one was an equal sign and one's a congruent sign. We use this one a lot. That's called definition of congruency. Definition, I don't necessarily need you to put congruent angles, but I would definitely write down the definition of congruency is super important, and we'll talk about this more in class tomorrow. All right, so you're going to try to do number 2 and number 3, and we'll complete the rest of these notes in class. Yay for geometric proofs. Ooh, fun fact of the video, did you know catfish are the only animals that naturally have an odd number of whiskers? Random.